Welcome everyone to the complete free AZ-900 Azure Fundamental course. My name is Sullivan. I'm an AZ-900 certified. I hold multiple certifications across the IT industry, and I'm going to be your instructor for this completely free Azure Fundamental course. Today we're on day 5, Azure, and we're going to be learning Azure Compute and Networking Services. These are the topics that the AZ-900 require us to be able to understand. And for today, we're going to be able to describe Azure Compute and Networking Services. We will be able to compare compute types, including containers, virtual machines, and functions. We're going to be able to describe virtual machine options, including Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Virtual Machine skill sets, availability sets, and Azure Virtual Desktops. You will be able to describe the resources required for virtual machines. You'll be able to describe applications, hosting options, including web apps, containers, and virtual machines. You'll be able to describe virtual networking, including the purpose of Azure Virtual Networks, subnets, peering, Azure DNS, Azure VPN Gateway, and Express Route. And finally, you will be able to define public and private endpoints. We need to be able to compare compute types, including containers, virtual machines, and functions. And I created this image for you just so you can see the symbols for containers, the symbol for virtual machines, and the symbol for functions. But we're going to know on the next slide what every single thing does. Containers. In Azure, a container is essentially a lightweight, standalone digital suitcase. It's specifically designed for your software. Instead of you having to copy an entire virtual operating system, what a container is going to do, it packages up just your application code, its library, and it's dependent into one tiny unit. Virtual machines are virtual computers in Azure that you can create, and they offer a maximum isolation. They have their own dedicated operating system. So virtual machines are basically virtual computers in Azure that you can create. Finally, we have functions, and functions are the most lightweight, using a serviceless model, which I highlighted for you. Remember this for your AZ-900 test, where the platform handles the infrastructure for event-driven execution. So now that we know the definition for virtual machines, container, and functions, what the AZ-900 wants you to be able to understand is that you have to be able to compare the different compute types. And virtual machines, basically, they are the most heavyweight. Remember this for your exam. They carry the full operating system for each virtual machine. They take long boot times and minutes, and they have hardware level isolations, and they're good for legacy and diverse workloads. Comparing to containers, containers are lightweight. They usually share the operating system kernel. They boot fast, extremely fast in seconds, and they're high portable, and they're ideal for Microsoft services and developer testing. And functions, which are serviceless, they are basically episodic, which means that they boot in milliseconds. Like they're so fast that they don't require of any like service. Like they're just serviceless. They scale to 0. It's a pay as per use. So as you use them, that's how you're gonna pay. And remember, so virtual machines, they have the full operating system. Containers, they share the operating systems. And serviceless, they don't require any servers. One of the things that the Azure Fundamentals for AZ-900 wants for us to know is that we have the ability to describe virtual machines options. And for this, I'm going to teach you the difference between Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Virtual Machines scale sets, also known as VMMS, availability sets, and Azure Virtual Desktops. So what are Azure Virtual Machines? Azure Virtual Machines are a private computer running on the cloud that you can control completely. So a virtual machine is basically, think about like a physical computer, but that physical computer is stored somewhere on the cloud virtually, but it's the same as a regular computer, just it's a virtual machine. Microsoft wants us to know about Azure Machine skill sets. And what Azure Machine skill sets, they are a group of identical computers that automatically multiply when busy and shrink when quiet. So for example, if I'm running high on resources, this virtual machine skills, what's going to do is going to multiply the computers when it's like a busy time, and then when it's quiet, it's going to shrink the amount of computers that we have. Availability sets are a safety setup that puts your computers on different power racks. So for example, if a single hardware crash, it won't take them all them down. So for example, we have availability sets. So I have an image right here of a region with 3 different availability sets. And as you guys see, for example, this one, the first one were to crash, the next availability set will take over. Azure Virtual Desktop is a system that lets employees securely log into a Windows desktop. Basically from any personal device, anywhere, you can access your virtual desktop. So it's think about like your computer. You just have your desktop right there and you can access your applications and stuff that you have on your desktop. So Microsoft wants us to know the resources required for virtual machines, and a virtual machine will require the same requirements that a physical computer requires, as a network interface card. You will need a virtual network. Probably this is another one of the things that a physical computer doesn't require. It's the same as a network, but it's virtual network. You will need some sort of where you can store data, so a storage disk. The image in this case is the operating system that you're going to install into the computer. You will need IP addresses. You will need the size of the virtual machine, and the virtual machine will need to be into a resource group. So we need to be able to describe some of the application hosting options, and here are the 3 most common for your Azure certification, and this is virtual machines, and they are used to have a total infrastructure control. You have containers that are for package and portable applications, and then web applications, which are app services, and this will be for fully managed websites. So remember these 3 concepts for your Azure certification test. We're going to be able to describe what virtual networking is, and virtual networking, or Azure VNet, is the fundamental building block for your private network in Azure. Think about like you have your own network, and in Azure it's going to be a virtual network, same as I have computers connected to each other and I can communicate inside that network with each other. In Azure is going to be a virtual network. Microsoft also wants us to know the purpose of Azure Virtual Networks. And I want to describe this as this is your own private cloud. Think about a secure slice of the cloud, like you have a piece of the cloud. And I have the analogy right here that without a virtual network, your cloud resources are like laptops sitting in a busy public coffee shop. So it's the same as if I'm sitting on a coffee shop and it's just public laptops that I can use. But if I didn't have the VNet, which is the virtual network, it would just be public laptops. But with the VNet, it's private. And subnets is just a way to chunk up your private cloud network into smaller, manageable, and secure connections. So this is like, for example, I have my big network and I want to cut that network into smaller networks. These are sub networks. So it's a network cut into smaller pieces. Peering, this is one of the terms that you have to know for your AZ-900. And peering in Azure is a way to connect 2 or more VNets or virtual networks so they can communicate directly. So I want to be able to connect 2 networks directly. I would use something called peering. Azure DNS, or Azure Domain Name System. And Azure DNS is a cloud service by Microsoft. It basically translates website and service names into computer IP addresses. So it does the same exact thing as a domain name server. It just does it over Azure. So it's the same thing as a DNS, just Azure DNS is called. Azure VPN Gateway. Think about this like a regular VPN, which secures your connections. Like it creates a brick, like it's going to encrypt your data between whatever you want to connect. But the term that we have for the AZ-900 is that an Azure VPN Gateway is a secure cloud-based network bridge. It encrypts the transcripts so your private networks and individual devices can safely communicate with Azure cloud resources over the public internet. This is just basically a VPN, but it's the term that is described for Azure is Azure VPN Gateway. This is one of the terms that you have to know for your AZ-900, and this is Azure Express Route. And this is a dedicated private connection that link your on-premises network directly to Microsoft Cloud. Example, I want to connect my on-premises servers to the cloud. I will use Express Route. Azure Public Endpoints. Think about this, it is an internet routable IP address that lets you connect to your Azure resources from anywhere in the world, so you can connect from any part in the world to your Azure resources, and these are called public endpoints. We also have something called Azure Private Endpoints, and this is a special network card that gives an Azure service a private IP address inside your virtual network. So private endpoints, think about like you can only access it from a specific private area. So this thing about public, private only is private, you can only access from a specific areas. So here's a quick recap of what we learned today. And today we learned to describe Azure compute and networking resources. What I would recommend you for today's recap is pause the video, read through every single dot of the things that we learned today, see if something wasn't clear, and if something wasn't clear, go back to that part of the video where I explained that specific thing, and then come back to this again and memorize that. And this is what I recommend for today's recap. So we're on the part of the course where we do our 5 to 10 daily practice questions for your Azure certification. These are free Azure questions that I go through you step by step, and let's start with our questions. Question number 1. Which Azure compute service is categorized as serviceless and allows you to run code without managing the underlying infrastructure? Keyword right here, serviceless. Remember, when I talk about serviceless, I'm usually referring about functions. So remember guys, if you guys see this on your test, serviceless are going to refer as functions. So Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that execute code in response to events without require the user to manage servers. Question number 2. Which service should you use to deploy a group of identical virtual machines that automatically increase or decrease in number based on demand? Remember when I talk about this, about automatically increasing or decreasing, we're usually talking about Azure Virtual Machine scale sets, which scale sets allows me to increase or decrease. It wouldn't be a VPN gateway because a VPN, it will encrypt my data between one. Availability sets, those are sets that in case something goes wrong, I can go to different availability sets. And Azure App Service, those are services for Azure. So the correct answer is Azure Virtual Machine sets. And Azure Virtual Machine sets is scale sets that allow you to deploy and manage a set of identical auto-scaling VMs to meet varying demand. Question number 3. What is the primary purpose of Azure Virtual Network peering? Number A, or letter A, to resolve domain names. That'll be Azure DNS. To connect to virtual networks. That makes sense, guys. That makes a lot of sense. To provide internet access. It's not an ISP. It's not providing internet to anyone. To encrypt on-premises traffic. That'll be Azure VPN. So the correct answer is to connect to virtual networks. VNet peering allows you to seamlessly connect 2 or more virtual networks in Azure so they can communicate as if they were one. Question number 4, guys. Which network service provides a dedicated private connection between an on-premises network and an Azure that does not go over the public internet? So this is a tricky question, guys. So which network service provides a dedicated private connection between an on-premises network and an Azure that does not go over the public internet? It's definitely not Azure DNS because that'll be converting my domain name. So definitely we can discard question number D. Azure VPN gateway, it will encrypt our data, but it still goes over the public internet. A virtual network, it wouldn't be a virtual network because that's inside our Azure. So the correct answer is Azure Express Route. And Express Routes provides a private dedicated connection to Azure through a connectivity provided by passing the public internet. Question number 5. In Azure networking, what is used to divide a virtual network into one or more smaller networks? Remember when I talk about dividing virtual networks into smaller networks, we're also talking about subnets. So the correct answer for this is going to be subnet, guys. Subnets allow you to segment virtual network into smaller block of IP address for better organization and security. Question number 6. Which Azure service provides a cloud-based desktop and app virtualization service? So we have Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Virtual Desktop, Azure Containers, and Azure Web Services. This is a trick question, guys, that can trick you. Keywords right here for this to be able to answer is cloud-based desktop and app virtualization service. That's going to be Azure Virtual Desktop. And Azure Virtual Desktop is a managed desktop and application virtualization service that provides a remote Windows experience. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys probably choose Azure Virtual Machines, but the key thing about this question is app virtualization service. So if you see something like this, it's usually going to refer to Azure Virtual Desktop, because a virtual machine gives you everything, the whole desktop, but for a virtual desktop you can do app virtualization service. So remember that for your test. Question number 7. Which compute option is best suited for running microservices in a lightweight, isolated environment without managing an entire operating systems? Let's see what we have, guys. If you know, pause the video and try to answer this question. So availability sets, that has nothing to do with the question that we're doing. Remember, availability sets is if something goes wrong, I can go to the next availability. Express routes is a way to communicate to Azure using a connection that doesn't go through the internet. So we can discard CND, and then we have virtual machines and containers. So virtual machines don't run microservices in a lightweight. What does run microservices are containers. Containers are lightweight, isolated environments that share the host kernel, making them ideal for microservices. Remember that, guys. Question number 8. What is the function of an Azure private endpoint? Keywords right here, guys. Private endpoint. Remember, don't get confused between public and private. So let's read what we have. To connect via private IP address, that sounds good, but let's keep reading. To manage DNS records, Azure private endpoint doesn't have to do anything with DNS. That'll be Azure DNS. To provide public access, that'll be a Azure public endpoint. And to create a VPN tunnel, that's something more for some sort of encryption. So the correct answer for this is to connect via a private IP. A private endpoint uses a private IP addresses from your VNet to connect to your privately and securely to a service powered by Azure Private Link. Next. Which resource is an essential requirement for creating an Azure virtual machine? Which resource is the essential requirement for creating an Azure virtual machine? So we have a virtual network, we have Azure Express Route, we have Azure Functions, and Azure DNS Zone. The correct answer for this is going to be a virtual network. Remember where I talk about the essential resources that we use? And one of the resources is a virtual network. So every Azure virtual machine must connect to a subnet within a virtual network to enable communication today. And question number 10 says, which Azure service provides a dedicated high-speed private connection from your on-premises data center to an Azure without using the public internet? So this one is a very, very simple question. If you remember when I was talking about high private speed connection from your on-premises data center to Azure without using the public internet, key term right here is without using the public internet. When I'm talking about not using the public internet, usually I'm referring about the Azure Express Route. And remember, Azure Express Route, remember this for your test, guys, provides a private dedicated connection that bypasses the public internet entirely, offering a more reliability and speed. So remember this, guy, Azure Express Routes bypasses the public internet. Remember this, guys. I want to say congratulations. You made it to the end of the day. You made it to the end of the Azure Fundamentals AZ-900 course. Stay tuned for the next video. Keep learning. Keep doing the stuff that you're doing. Hopefully this course has been helpful to you. And if it is, hit your like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff so you can help me. That's all I ask for you of your part. And see you guys on the next video.